So hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm here today doing something a little different. I'm doing yet another awesome interview, and today I have a dear old friend that also happens to have been a former Apache pilot, among many different things that he's done over the years. And that is my awesome guest, Rex Swetnam, former Apache pilot. How you doing, Rex?
Hey, great to hear from you, Rod. It's good to be with you.
Definitely,
And
man.
when old friends, man, we go back to the early '90s.
Way back, man, way back.
Yeah,
That's the coolest thing in the world, you know.
yeah.
Back when sims weren't really even simulations compared to what we
No,
have
you're
today.
absolutely right.
You know,
You're
it
absolutely
was a
right.
different world. So uh,
Yeah,
let's start out with talking about you and your career and the things you've done and the places you've been, and then we'll kind of jump more into the simulation world and whatnot and how some of that kind of carries over.
sure. Just went graduated from flight school at Fort Rucker in December of '90, and which was kind of ironic because you know what happened in
Yep.
January of '91. The flight of 8 Apaches from the first of the 101st went in and took those early warning radar sites out. And what is so interesting to me about that is I remember sitting at Rucker, going through all the programs and everything and watching that flight, and how many years later, especially talking about the Apache community in and of itself, the guy who was the flight lead on that mission, who actually fired the first shot of Desert Storm, I'll just say his nickname was Tip. And it was amazing that he would be my instructor pilot later on down the road.
Oh
And
wow.
yeah, so you come across a lot of commingling paths with all your buds, and then you watch a video, and then all of a sudden, boom, that guy's teaching. So it's been a really interesting time. So graduated from flight school, like I said, December of '90, armament officer course. Then onto AQC just a few months later. And then right at that point, Desert Storm was kind of dwindling down. I graduated primary and instruments, UH-1 Hueys, and then at that time we did tracks at Rutgers. So you would either stay the Huey track, Cobras, OH-58s. Blackhawks and Apaches were an add-on after you graduated from flight school when I went. And I had an old W4 gun pilot, Vietnam veteran, who wanted me to go scouts first because he said he thought it would make me a better gun driver going scouts. So I did. So graduated flying OH-58s, Alpha Chucks. And just I was very fortunate. We were getting rid of our Cobras, so I did get a little Cobra time, Cobra transition, probably like, I don't know, somewhere around 80 hours, 85 hours of Cobra time. So H1 Mod S. And then we got rid of all the Cobras and then just picked up the Alpha models, H-64 Alphas. And it's a lot different than flying Ds. Back then, you stayed in the front seat till there was a back seat available. You were never a dual seater unless you were an instructor pilot. And so I went through, I don't know, my first 5 or 6 years. And also our unit was heavily Vietnam veterans, gun guys. So lots of experience. So after about 5 or 6 gunneries in the front seat, they moved me to the back seat and started flying as a pilot in command of an A model. And then December 24th of '02, I was down in Texas. So my wife and I were down in Texas with my mom and dad celebrating Christmas. And I got a phone call from my head instructor pilot and said that we were activated and we've got a few days, but enjoy Christmas, and then you'll be hearing from us shortly. So before I knew it, in January, we were activated. We went down to Fort Bragg, which was kind of where our sister unit was anyway. We were a part of the 18th Airborne Corps. And at that time, everything was kind of running up for Iraq. Our sister unit had already been in Afghanistan for a while, and we were at Hood for 6 months, and I think that they just thought that their tanks running downtown Baghdad, and they said, well, we don't need you, but guess what? Have we got a deal for you? You can replace your sister unit in Afghanistan. So that summer, we all shipped out and landed in Bagram Air Force Base, or Bagram Base, and so that was July of 2003. And we didn't come home till May of 2004, and flew lots of combat in Afghanistan. We were up north, so it was crazy altitudes, 15, 16,000 feet, MSL, flying a ridge line at 800 AGL, making sure people didn't shoot down at convoys from atop the mountains. And
now that's kind of high for you guys, isn't it? 1,600.
That's extremely high.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
High.
I'm talking, you're normally what, 50, 100, something like that, in that range, kind of?
Well, it depends. Low, if you're in a high threat radar environment, you're going to be really, really low, but we weren't. So I was more, we were all really concerned more of RPGs and small arms fire than anything. So we would, generally fly a little higher, that. I personally flew, probably above 1,000 feet AGL, just because if I had to roll in to shoot rockets on somebody, I needed that altitude. I needed, it's hard to do it when you're at 50 feet on the deck.
Yeah, you ain't pointing your nose down that easy.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah,
absolutely
exactly.
Right. So I like the altitude of being able to. Yeah. Absolutely, and that's the other thing is. We had, if I remember correctly, I think it was a 500-foot for engagements of 500-foot hard deck, because as you would come, being that heavy and that high altitude, you would kind of mush through as you're pulling up, and you were still kind of going down.
Yes, exactly.
Absolutely. So we always kind of started to pull our pull-ups around 400 or 500 feet, and I mean there's some guys that came pretty close. They were lucky, down to about 60 feet.
Wow.
And then we were shooting a lot of white phosphorus back then, and he wound up rolling in shooting Willie Pete's, and I've seen the video that he actually went through some of the white phosphorus with his aircraft.
Some of his own stuff while he was coming up out of it.
Because he was coming up out of it, and I witnessed it with my own eyes. So
gravity.
Absolutely. So did a lot of escorts, medevac, troop insertions in villages, direct action against targets. And generally nothing, there wasn't an aircraft that flew single ship anywhere. So they were always in pairs or escorted by gunships, so Apache gunships. So, it was a good experience for me in certain ways. And then obviously a bad experience because to see what the Taliban did to the young kids is what was so disturbing. If they ever found out that a parent or the adults were helping coalition forces, you would see a lot of that taken out on the children. And so that was kind of disturbing. But but it was certainly the best flying of my career. You know, they'd load you up with an aircraft and say, you know, patrol this area, and you know, it never really dawned on me the massive amount of responsibility of being pilot in command in combat, loaded up with weapons, because ultimately it's your decision on whether you pull that trigger or not. And so it is really, it was a lot of responsibility. And I think, well, I don't think, I know we did it right. So it was a very, you know, in that aspect of it, knowing that we were helping the guys on the ground, it was just a very rewarding experience for me to be able to help, you know, help everybody on the ground and to be there for, you know, each other. So good experience. Came home. You know, our family was in the hotel business, and so, you know, after being gone for 18 months, it was a hard decision. I had 15 years in, and so I got out and had to get back to our businesses. And after a while, I would say maybe 4 years after that, 4 or 5 years after that, just decided to go back in and finish my 20, which I did. And that's when the longbow came up, and demodeled, transition, went back for the staff course, the TAC Ops course, and the safety course, along with the longbow transition. So I felt like I was permanent duty at Fort Rucker there for a while, you know, going back in, and eventually became CW4, and I was a battalion safety officer for the unit and loved every bit of it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for your service, Rex.
Oh, well, sure. Thanks so much. So it was a hell of a career, and, you know, retired in 2016, and 5 years of flying longbows, and then you know, 13 years flying A models, and then, you know, like I said, that year and a half of flying OH-58s and some Hueys. But yeah, so it was a good time. It was a good, you know, great time, and still keep in touch with a lot of the guys. And it's so funny to me that I look back at, you know, 2003 was a magical time. You know, my brigade commander was Crutchfield. He was Colonel Crutchfield, and, you know, now he was the commanding general of Rucker. And I remember running around Bagram, jogging with a guy who was our commanding general, who was a 1-star. And you might find this interesting, but his name is Lloyd Austin, and he is the current Secretary of Defense now.
Oh, no kidding.
Oh yeah. Wow.
So
I've got pictures of the two of us getting ready.
Excellent.
Yeah, getting ready to run. So, you know, and then when we were at Hood, we were with the 4th Aviation Brigade, attached to the 1st Cav, and the brigade commander was a guy by the name of Colonel McConville. And now he is 4-star General McConville, I believe, Chief of Staff of the Army, and he's the highest ranking Army aviator in the Army.
Wow.
And so, you know, it's like all those guys. So we were attached to the 10th Mountain Division under Crutchfield, and you know, all those guys. And then my boss is, you know, my XO then is now a 2-star now, and my battalion commander retired as a 1-star. So, man, it's just like 2003, that in that time period, it just seemed to, you know, if you did a good job, it really, you know, when you were there in the beginning, which we were for the most part, you know, it was a magical time.
That's good stuff, man. And then in general, let's talk a little bit about Air Cav. How does it?
Sure.
Wasn't that created like in the Vietnam era, pretty much, with the helicopters?
Yeah, it really was. And really and truly, and I forgot the mission, you know, it was I think it was Hal Moore's mission.
Yes, that's the name I remember too.
You're correct. And gosh, I'm trying, Bruce Crandall, I think, was the Huey pilot who received the Medal of Honor during that mission. So
when we were soldiers, right?
Yes,
That's what
yeah,
that was.
absolutely.
Yeah, that was
That
the
was
movie.
that was generally one of the first, and that was right in the beginning. And don't quote me on the dates, but somewhere around 65-ish,
Sounds
64,
about right.
65,
Yeah, because
somewhere right around there.
I guess they didn't
Um,
realize at the time they could pull off using choppers the way they did, and then they realized
exactly,
how invaluable that it really was at that point,
absolutely,
and then it was
absolutely.
created from there, right?
Yeah, and then just tactics evolved, and it's so interesting how tactics do morph over the years. Back in Vietnam, they were moving and shooting and diving gun runs, and then we kind of got away from that and doing the line abreast, hovering, because the mission, if you remember, and then back in the 80s, it was the fall of Fulda Gap and the Russian tanks coming across, and that was the mission. So it became very static, where you had the line abreast 5-6 Apaches just shooting hellfires at tanks, and then you go from that to Afghanistan, which, number one, you couldn't hover out of ground effect like that,
Yeah.
because of the altitudes, and it was very much a moving, running and diving guns, rockets, and obviously keep moving, because one of our head instructor pilots, who actually he is the only Army aviator for the first cab to win the Distinguished Flying Cross in Desert Storm. His name's Ed, and Ed was our senior SP, and he was, one of the things that he always told me is keep your speed up, not only just because of the altitude and power management and everything that we were dealing with in the mountains of northern Afghanistan, but small arms fire, trying for them to aim at you, when you've got speed up, the chances of being hit or being hit, are certainly decreased. And so I always kept my speed up quite a bit. So,
That
but
makes
yeah,
sense.
that's when I think you were right. I think it was that mission with Hal Moore is really the kind of where air assault, air cav really kind of starting. And I'm sure there may have been other missions I'm not familiar with, but I am familiar with that one.
Well, that's where the whole, like it was Hueys, then it was Cobras, and then
Exactly.
like what you're talking about, the Apache. Now, wasn't the Apache basically built for the Cold War, right? That was like late '70s tech, wasn't it?
You're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. It was meant to stop the Russian tanks coming across Germany.
Because it
That
was really more of a tank killer than the A-10, even if you think about it.
absolutely,
Because if you look
absolutely.
at what you're carrying, my God, it's a whole bunch of Hellfires, some rockets, you know.
Yeah, and that Hellfire, it was created as the tank buster.
Yeah,
I
tank
mean,
penetrator. Yep.
that's what it was based on. So yeah, I mean, it was that's exactly really how it was created, and then, like I said, how everything morphs into other things, and then it became just one hell of a CAS aircraft, and just in the hands of a right individual, man, it's deadly. It's absolutely deadly.
So, what's the difference in terms of like flight characteristics and stuff between, like you said, you had a little bit of time in a Cobra?
Yeah, about 80 hours of Cobra, and
So, what was it like
yeah,
going from a Cobra to an Apache?
maneuverability,
Yeah.
and that is strictly based on the rotor system. The rotor system is so much more forgiving, and semi-rigid rotor system on the Cobra versus a fully articulated rotor system. You can roll and loop in an Apache. You can invert a Cobra. You just have to keep positive G's on the rotor system at all times, and if you don't, you'll snap the blade.
Yeah.
So it's a lot more. You're dealing with mass bumping and all that kind of stuff. So it's a lot more dangerous when you kind of start getting into those attitudes. I can tell you, it's the Apache was just so forgiving. on, I never got into a maneuver, whether in training or combat, especially towards the latter part of my career, because I just had so much confidence in the aircraft.
Yeah, and that's a big help too, for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I've never seen them side by side, a Cobra and Apache, but I'd imagine the Cobra would be smaller.
It is, and a lot narrower.
That's
You
what I
know,
mean.
it's
It's thinner, it's smaller.
it is. I suspect it's if I went back to it, if I remember correctly, it was faster. It
Okay.
was faster on an all out, just straight and
I was
level.
going to say straight line. You probably, yeah, because of the extra weight, or the Apache's extra weight versus the Cobra's
Yeah,
lightness.
and just the drag and the thickness and the width of the aircraft. So, but yeah, the Cobra was so much sleeker, but the Apache in that rotor system, man, you could just do so much with it.
Now, how much did that change between the A and the D model? I mean, I imagine with time, technology bumps and stuff.
D model's a lot heavier.
Oh, really? Okay.
So yeah, because of all the other stuff that they put on it.
The long, yeah,
Um,
the fire control radar. Yeah.
yeah, and even on the birds that don't have the mass mallard assembly or the radar, it still has all the avionics
Hmm.
in it, and so it's still heavier and beefier, and it's really the same engine. So anytime, which is typical Army, they take something that's a sports car, and then they just add a bunch of stuff to it and weigh it down, so you definitely had to be a little bit more power conscious with a longbow, than you ever did with an A model. I mean, A model was just like a sports car.
Yeah, probably like a more of a '70s muscle car versus a more
Exactly.
a more modern sports car with the longbow, huh?
Exactly.
Now, what kind of top speeds did you guys ever hit in those things when you were going all out, man? Or because that's not something you would do all the time, I'd imagine, huh?
No, 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 no. I got into a situation where I got into some winds coming over a mountain in northern Afghanistan, and I was scared several times in
Right.
Afghanistan. And that was one time I got scared, and I wasn't even being shot at. We got into I don't know, a downdraft coming off of one of the mountains, and I just remember seeing 181 knots true, and I was in a descent, but my aircraft was flat and level.
Oh, wow.
And the first thing, and without having to go into a lot of aerodynamics and stuff, the first thing I was thinking about was retreating blade stall, and that really caught my attention. Um, so that's the fastest I've ever been, and I
Nice.
wasn't intending it.
Right?
So
You weren't even having fun doing it, right? Breaking the rules or
it wasn't
anything,
like I was enjoying it either. So
right?
yeah.
That's
But
something.
yeah, I remember looking at the HDU, the helmet display unit on the monocle on my eye, and it was 181, and I'll never forget it.
Wow. So what would be
Yeah,
your average cruising to a target, or to waypoint to
120.
waypoint? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, roughly 120 knots.
Yeah, I flew a helicopter myself for the first time. Actually, for my birthday in September, my girlfriend had bought me a ride in a helicopter because she knows how much I
Yeah,
love them in simulations. And
yeah, yeah.
they had an R-44. I think it's a
Oh yeah,
Robinson
yeah.
44
Mm-hmm.
helicopter, and it took me up for about an hour. And guy took us up, and he pretty much gave me the stick right away. And
Oh wow.
it was the most awesome experience,
Yeah,
and I think all my years of helicopter simulations have helped me because I've never done the real thing or been in the military or any
yeah.
of that stuff, but it did really help me. But the thing that I noticed right off the bat is like it was the most thrilling thing ever, but I was scared shitless the whole time because I don't know where the oh shit moment comes in. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
I'm controlling the helicopter, and like you're talking about those winds, right? So
Yeah.
it was a little bit of a windy day here. I'm right outside of Pittsburgh, you know,
Yeah.
and it was a little bit of a windy day, and we were just flying along, and I'm barely moving the stick because I know that you really don't have to move the stick that much, you know,
Yeah. You don't.
because
Very,
if you
very little.
do, you're going to be all over the place, you know.
Exactly.
So I had that, you know, mindset from simulations and stuff, and I
Yeah.
was set my joysticks up for sims, you know, so I just have to move it just a little bit with the proper
Yeah.
thresholds. And wow, as the wind started like jostling me around a little bit, and the guy next to me is the pilot. He's not worried at all because he understands where the threshold is for oh shit. You know what
Sure.
I'm
Sure.
saying? But I,
Most instructor pilots, they're not going to take, unless you really scare them, they're not going to take the flight controls from you, because part of that uh, part of letting you work through it is your learning
it's
curve,
the learning
and
process. Yes.
that's a learning process, and it's teaching you. So if they always take it from you to do that, if they know that you can handle it all, and so much of it is self-confidence as well,
Yep.
because once you get through it and you're like, okay, I did that, so you can face it again and say, okay, I don't have to panic. I've already done it, been there, and bought that T-shirt. So
Right.
yeah, it's all good. It's all good. So
We just showed our age with that comment.
oh
Bought the
yeah,
T-shirt. Remember that? What was
oh
that
yeah,
back in the 80s? It was like I
yeah,
went on vacation and all I bought was this crappy T-shirt for you.
yep,
Remember
yep. That's it.
that?
That's it.
But yeah,
Yeah,
that was the coolest thing. So I can totally understand what you're talking about because like just a
yeah.
little bit of wind, you know. I mean, I think most people don't understand how like a helicopter really isn't meant to fly. It's flown by technology essentially, right? Like an airplane.
Yeah,
You know what I'm
yeah. I
saying?
forgot. I remember seeing a poster and it said a million moving parts at all at once. Uh, trying to beat the air into submission, and
Yes, and
and,
that
and
it
in
describes it, right?
reality, that there's a lot of truth to that. So
Yeah, because these things
yeah,
really aren't meant to fly. I mean, they are by
yeah,
technology, but like, you know, an airplane has wings that helps, you know,
yeah,
you can coast in. You know what I mean? If you
absolutely.
lose an engine on an airplane, you know, you lose your power plant in a helicopter, it's going to be a little bit of a different ride, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
I mean, there's other things built
I
in
will
to
have
help
to
you.
tell you. I will have to tell you, Rod. Of course, so my father was the chief pilot for the state police for the state of Texas, and and then he'd been through the Bell helicopter test pilot program, and did helped with the original engine toppings on the Jet Ranger back in the late '60s, and so forth, and he and his partner, that's all they did was shoot out, actually touchdown, zero ground run, touchdown, full to the ground auto rotations. And they would do them every single day for hours. And
Oh,
by the end
wow.
of it, they had a I think it was like a federal grant for them flying. And so they flew like 5 hours a day for an entire year. Said Dad always said it was the greatest thing that ever happened to him, and one of the worst things, because uh, they had to stay fairly close in case they were on a call, but they had to be in the air like 2.5 hours in the morning and 2.5 hours in the afternoon, and which sounds fun, but after a while, when there's only so much you can do when you have to stay within 15 to 30 minutes of your home base. So that's when you start getting creative, and they were in their middle 20s and they got pretty creative. So I can't fathom of that, but they were so good at auto rotations by the end of that year. That you could put it in somebody. I mean, they started betting. They would have a mark on the runway, and they would go to old abandoned strips, so there was no, really virtually no traffic, and they would put an X on the, on the piece of concrete and everything, and it was like whoever would get the right or the left front skid tip closest to the X, the other person would have to buy lunch. So so then it got into a competition and all that kind of stuff. So by the end of that year, I know that they were is about as good as anybody. And one of my godfathers was one of the original. Actually, he was one of the original Bell helicopter test pilots on the Cobra, and that was called the Sioux Scout.
Wow.
And it was basically it was a tandem seat Bell 47 with some M60s on the nose. And he was one, his name was, he has passed on since then, so I can say his name, but his name was Bill Thorne, Thorn. And he was one of the Bell helicopter guys that taught some of the original Mercury 7 astronauts. They had helicopter training, hovering and whatnot. I don't know how many hours, but they all went through some helicopter training, and that was way back when, early 60s. And he was one of the guys that did it, who taught them. So, that's the other thing I love about aviation is I love just sitting down with someone and just talking. It's because everybody, when you're involved in it, you have such a passion for it and a love of flying that just hearing the stories are amazing. And I can tell you, one thing that to this day, I still had an influence on me when I was a young Army aviator. And this was when I was still flying OH-58s. We landed at Oceana Naval Air Station in Virginia Beach and had a RON remain overnight. And we went to the O Club at Oceana. And, this was 92, 93 timeframe. And one of the neatest things I saw was, I think it was the Black Aces squadron at Oceana. Anyway, you had all these 25, 26, 27-year-old guys sitting around the table, and there were the World War II veterans from the same squadron. They had their blazers and the patch.
Oh wow!
Of that, and seeing those guys for our greatest generation of aviators sitting there. And, they were doing their hands and like this with the guys that were 23, 24, 25 sitting right next to them.
Showing that's them what the maneuvers they did and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. The guys that were flying World War II fighters, Hellcats and all that kind of stuff. And, they're sitting right next to guys, an F-14 Tomcat guy, and really back then they were still flying F-14s in the early 90s. And, that's what I remember sitting with my fellow Army aviators, and we just kind of commented about how cool is that? That was pretty. That's pretty neat.
I get that hair standing up on the back of your neck when you get in those situations. I've done some very cool stuff over the years like that too.
Yeah, it's just so neat.
One of the coolest things I got to do back in the 90s when we knew each other back then, and when I was covering nothing but flight sims all over the place, a lot of companies would send you out to junkets. They would pay to fly me out somewhere, and they want to show me the beta of this new simulation, whatever it might be. Or they would have a launch event. I can't remember specifically. I want to say it was Microsoft Flight Simulator, the first combat flight simulator, the first Microsoft combat flight simulator. It was either that or the second one, and they'd send us out to this event. But the people that were there were the Tuskegee Airmen.
Oh wow!
It was like the last remaining living Tuskegee Airmen, and this is like 1990, 98, 99-ish. So like, and at this time, they brought them in to kind of like, give us ideas of, how to fly the Mustang, right? And they were telling us all the stories and stuff. And it was just, I'll tell you what, that was probably the experience that sticks with me most. That is just that just I'll never forget more than anything, you know. And it was just the
Yeah.
coolest thing because if you think about it, like, you know, it was a different world for those guys back then. I mean, people
Oh
talk
my
about,
gosh,
you know,
yes.
you talk about stuff these days with, you know, racism and all the stuff that goes on
Yeah.
and how everybody's all up in arms and stuff. And it's like
Um,
the stuff that
they
those guys dealt with was
yeah,
just a
what they
different
had to put
world.
up with. You're absolutely right. They, you know, so much admiration for those guys.
Exactly. And what blew me away the most, and this is what sticks with me more than anything, is just how, I guess, modest and cool and just
Yeah,
okay with everything. You know what
yeah,
I mean? Like it could, but the thing is, if you look back, and I guarantee if you look up any of these guys that were, you know, known as Tuskegee Airmen, almost every one of them had grown into like amazing careers. Like,
yeah.
you know
Oh
what I
yeah,
mean? Like
yeah.
they just became somebody, you know? And I got to have dinner with these guys. I think it was like Morton's Steakhouse or something in LA they took us to, you
Oh
know?
wow,
And it was just, and
that's
it's like,
awesome.
and it was like this old, you know, like dark wood steakhouse with like Frank Sinatra would go eat steaks kind of place in the
Yeah,
90s that
yeah,
was still there.
yeah.
And just
That's great.
hearing these guys' stories, you know, like I said, and they
Yeah,
told these stories and they weren't angry, you know what I mean? They weren't like, you
yeah,
know, resentful. They were just
yeah.
like, this is how it was, this is what we had to do, but they persevered. You know what I mean? They ended up being better pilots than the white pilots, like
Well,
literally.
you know, that's the you know the way I've always. This is the way I just think about it. I don't care whether you're male or female, whether you're black, white, brown, green. The guys on the ground don't care that. All they want is for you to protect them and put steel on target.
That's
That's
it.
it.
Yep.
And that's your job. And so that's the way I always kind of just, you know, I just, you know, all that kind of stuff. I didn't, you know, never bothered me at all. And, you know, whoever I'm flying with, you know, as long as you're competent and can do your job, that's all
That's
I
right.
care about.
That's right. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's the one that sticks with me most. And I met a lot of people
Yeah.
like you and was it Colonel Bud Anderson, Electronic
Oh yeah.
Arts, Jane's Combat
Yeah.
Simulations had Colonel Bud
Yep.
Anderson come out to
Yep.
E3 the one year, and we got to have
Yep.
interviews with him and hang out with him and hear him tell some stories because he was Chuck
Like a
Yeager's wingman.
triple A or something like he was Chuck's
Chuck's wingman.
Jaeger's. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Old Crow, I believe, was
Oh,
his
that's right.
Mustang. Old Crow.
P-51.
And then there was a couple other guys. I don't remember the names, but I had met a few different Vietnam era, you know, aces. And then there was one that was a Korean War ace. And that was pretty crazy because they were telling stories of like that, you know, they didn't realize this until after the war, except for the pilots that probably couldn't talk about it, but they knew that like there were Chinese pilots, not just Russians, you know, or
Oh yeah.
you know what I mean,
Um,
mixed
I,
in.
I I never met a Vietnam ace. Steve Ritchie and of course Randy Cunningham are the ones that I'm just thinking right off the top of my head. I did know a Korean ace,
Hmm.
and he wound up being he was the highest ranking Air Force POW in the Hanoi Hilton,
Oh
and
wow.
so his name was Robbie Reisner, Robinson Reisner. He has since passed on. When I met him, when my dad was, you know, like I said, chief pilot for the state police in Texas, he was on the governor's task force of that, you know, dare and against the drugs and everything. So my father was wound up flying him in a helicopter, and they started talking, and that's how I kind of got to meet him and get to know him and everything. But so he was an ace in the Korean War, and his which was a really bad thing for him in Vietnam, because what happened was is he was on the cover of Time magazine
Oh man.
as a Korean ace,
Yeah.
and that they, you know, obviously when he was at the Hanoi Hilton, that came back and you know, haunted him
Yeah.
for his tip. But he was there for 7.5 years.
Wow.
Um, So yeah, so but yeah, when you were talking about Korean Ace, he's the only one. He's the only ace I've ever met. So
Wow.
but
But that's like you're
yeah.
saying, that there is a special passion that so many of us have for this kind of stuff, and that's definitely it. That's what's kept me in it for so long.
Oh yeah,
Like
absolutely.
I get a lot of people sometimes are like, oh, you're not the best pilot or this and that. And I'm like, I know I'm not, but that's not the point. You know what I mean? Like when it comes to the simulations and stuff, I can't remember half the shit between the F-18 and the F-16 and you know
Yeah,
what I mean? All the different stuff. If I would just
yeah,
stick with one, I would do really well.
yeah.
That's my
Oh yeah.
plan too, with what's going on and what's coming up.
Definitely.
But
And
right.
yep.
So helicopter aviation's in your blood then.
Oh yeah, oh yes. Well, and aviation in general. So my grandfather was pilot in command of B-24 Liberator and flew 36 combat missions. Flew a mission and a half on D-Day. His second mission, I've got his World War II diary. So I, was going through it, and he's talks about when he woke up on D-Day or the morning of the invasion, and they were going to go bomb, and so he did one mission, and then his second mission, he had a couple of engines fail on him on takeoff, so that was aborted. So, and that's all he did, on that particular day. So but yeah, so he did 36 missions, came back, and then of course my father. So I, Lord, I remember Bell Helicopter would bring down, especially because my dad and his partner flew the Jet Ranger for the state police at that time, and Bell Helicopter would always bring down a new and improved Jet Ranger, or when the Long Rangers came out, the 206L, and they would, let my dad, basically take it for a spin. And since it wasn't a state police aircraft, I mean, I could get in it. And so that's, my father, I don't know, I was 6, 7 years old, something like that, maybe even younger the very first time. But I remember going up with them,
Nice.
and so you're right. It's like, man, they actually pay you to do this,
Right.
I mean, it was just always exciting to me, and so I knew, from an early age, that was the path that I wanted. So, and that's just what happened. So, yeah.
So the Jet Ranger, isn't that the same thing almost as the OH-58? Isn't that the same
Yes.
frame?
Yeah. Same looks the same. I think the tail rotor's a little smaller in a 58, but it's basically a Bell Jet Ranger.
Just a military version, right? A couple
Exactly.
modifications and
Yeah.
whatnot.
Yeah.
So in terms of your career, did you start with Hueys then?
Yeah. So primary and instruments was the UH-1 Huey. And then when and I don't remember how long primary was and how long instruments were, but in the Huey. And then we broke off in our tracks, and then that's when I went OH-58. And so I stayed in the scout track at Rucker for the remainder of my time in flight school. And then when I graduated from flight school in OH-58, I came home, and then that's when I did the transition into Cobras. And because we had to put a bunch of hours on the Cobras to turn them in. And so they were like, hey, take this young W1 out and, go fly him. And I was flying with all instructor pilots. And so I wound up getting an in-house transition into the H1 Mod S, and I flew that, like I said, flew it for about 80, 85 hours. And then we got rid of all the Cobras, and then started picking up our alpha model Apaches. And, I spent, just shy of 14 years flying A models, and another nearly 6 years flying longbows.
Wow. That's a
you
pretty
know.
exciting career. So how do you beat that? You know what I mean? Like now that you're retired, like how do you ever like find something to
Well,
fly that would be that fun?
well, you know, I will tell you that
Because you got to miss it.
I do. I don't miss all the paperwork. I
Sure.
don't miss all the other aspect of. I certainly don't miss all the studying.
No.
I think it's something that people don't understand really how much studying there really is. Every year at gunnery, you first of all you qualify every year at gunnery, but prior to that, there's multiple tables that you're firing in and working on and having to pass in the simulator. Number one, there's written exams. Um, it's just and all that. It's not just it's not just all weapon stuff. I mean, you're also on check rides. You're talking about weather and airspace and aerodynamics and
Sure. And then they
aeromet.
change. And then they change the software on you, and now you got to go through
Well,
another classification,
that's
right?
oh my gosh, that was you absolutely, because with the longbow, we had a mixture. We were a heavy, we had 24 longbows and eight airframes per company, and then that, of course, then that changed. They went back down to the old attack battalion type numbers at 18, and but we had a mixture of block one and block twos, and each one of the block ones were pretty consistent, but the block twos, they were not all updated all at the same time on the softwares. So it would blow your mind on trying to go in and find especially for me, it was in the com page.
A special page, right? Yeah, going through your
Yeah, man,
yeah.
it was insane
It's like,
because
why would
you
they
would have
put that there, right? You're going.
yeah, it was always in a different place from
Yep.
the aircraft that you flew previously, and so from what I understand, the units they're getting ready to transition into the Echoes now, and so they all had block twos and latest software and everything. They just went back. They just got back from Afghanistan in 2018 or 2019. I'm not sure, but my old unit, and so they took all the longbows, and so yeah. But you're absolutely right. It was really insane trying to go between block one and block two because certain things that you need are in different places. There's different ways
To get there. Yeah.
of getting there, and you would have to kind of remember them, and that was a challenge. And then by that time, I was staff, so I was the battalion safety officer. So I wasn't getting to fly as much as the younger guys were. So it was even more difficult for me because I wasn't getting quite the cockpit time that I used to get, when I was younger. So I'd get in, you get in the back seat and say, okay, where's this after, and then
Move
all of a
that
sudden,
to. Yep.
then it kind of, gets back and you kind of just fall into place. And then it's like you get back into your comfort zone. But, there's a few seconds where you actually kind of have to sit there and say, okay, I'm flying a block two, not a block one. It's this. And you have to kind of really just mentally, think about it. So,
I think
yeah.
that the common thing I've learned over the years when it comes to aviators in general, be it helicopter or fixed wing in general, is that uh, the past probably 20, 30 years is very different than what it was for the Korea, the Vietnam, the World War II. In terms of the pilots, the capabilities, every one of you guys I've ever met are just super freaking smart. And you
Yeah.
have to be. You know what I mean? Like, and
Yeah.
you guys are all sharp as a tack when it comes to memory. You know what I mean? Because you have to. Like
Yeah,
you're
you do.
saying, that's what most young guys today, I think, and that's the message I would like to get out as well during the video is if you're looking to be an aviator, the first thing you've got to do is you better be pretty book smart, and you better have a good memory, and you better be willing to push that to the limit, because the stuff that you guys had to do, you know what I mean, and remember, and changes, and just
Yeah,
keeping the thing afloat, and then just having a split second to make a decision to go to this page to look at this, but not miss something at the
yeah,
same
and
time.
that I tell you that goes into emergency procedures because you don't, when something's going wrong, you don't have time to sit and think about it. You got to know what the procedure is immediately and act upon it. So there's a lot of studying and a lot of reading that goes along with the territory. And not that that's a bad thing. I mean, I think it's absolutely a good thing, that because you've got to stay up on it. But it's like any other profession, Rod. It's look at doctors.
Oh yeah.
They have to do the exact same. Lawyers have to do, because each year something new comes out. And it was kind of that way with us, with all the changes between block 1s and block 2s, and going from 13.1 to 13.2, 13, whatever it was on a block 2. And this would change. Some were subtle, others were major to me. And but you know what, that I forgot what that saying is, but the worst day that you have or a bad day in the aircraft flying is still beat sitting in some cubicle somewhere.
That's right. Yeah. I guess my point is it's more than just being handed the keys to Dad's Corvette. You know what I mean?
You're absolutely, yeah, you're absolutely right.
You have
Absolutely.
like the best job in the world, and you have this multi-million-dollar piece of machinery to take out, but there's a
Yeah.
lot of responsibility that goes along with it, I think, too.
Yeah.
And I think that's
Yeah.
what kids don't realize, at least. They're
Yeah.
thinking
You're
about going
absolutely.
into this
Yeah.
stuff. They're like, well, because I would have loved to have done this, but I took a different route through my, I had kids young and all that stuff. It just wasn't
Right.
going to happen, and I could never,
Mm.
take orders from people very well. I was that
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah, there were some RLOs that that us aviators, we didn't really care for, didn't want to fly with.
That's right.
So I get it. I get it.
It's a certain breed, I guess,
Yeah.
is what my overall point is. And there's a lot more than just being able to physically handle the controls and put the thing in and out of, hot spots, and do things. There's a lot involved with being an
I
aviator for the military.
mean, I'm hesitant to get into weapons on too many areas, but there's min and max ranges. There's the most effective range to fire a weapon. That then you get into ceilings and min and max, and there's I don't know how many versions now of a Hellfire that have that they're up to now. And so each particular, with rockets, then you had some with some Mark 40 motors, the others with Mark 66, and they were both different ranges. So then you had to sit there and think about which
carrying. Yeah,
exactly. So there was there's a lot to it. There's a lot to it.
for sure.
So back in the day, and you would probably have to help me on the time frame,
Yeah.
but I saw, and I don't remember the magazine, but on the back of the cover of a magazine, I was in a bookstore, and I was just kind of going through some sim magazines and looking through that. But it was certainly definitely the early 90s. But I saw this picture of a top view of an A model Apache, and it was like it was called Interactive Magic, was the, if I remember, the publisher.
Yep.
And so they were doing an Apache gaming one, and so I just picked up the phone and called them and said, "Hey, I'm an A model guy. If I can help, let me know." And of course, I'd been a big Micro Pros. You remember Micro Pros Gunship?
Oh yeah. Yep.
you know,
Gunship 2000, all that.
exactly, all those. So I had all those and stuff. So I said, hey, let's do this, and got to meet some of those guys, and well, I say meet over the telephone, and so I kind of worked on that and helped them with that, and with the technology that we had and what they could do, it was a decent sim compared to Gunship, that original, and
Oh,
so
it was day and night compared to that. You know what I mean? Like
exactly.
when you go back to the old micropros, which is late 80s, early 90s, those were literally just games. You're just pointing in a
Yeah,
direction and shooting something,
exactly.
They tried though. They tried
Yeah,
with the best you could do with however many colors we had in VGA and sub
I
VGA.
remember that.
you
I do
know,
remember, man. That's funny going back. That is
those were
going back.
monster pixels, but that's how
Yeah,
we ended up meeting.
yeah,
Is I was covering simulations,
yep.
and the magazine I had online was called PC Multimedia and Entertainment Magazine, and we were
That was
one of
it.
the only and first people to really go online and create a website that covered like games and simulations, and my
Yeah,
passion was the simulations. My
yeah.
first experience with sims was, I think, in like 1986 or 85, trying to fly Microsoft Flight Simulator under a bridge on an Atari ST. And to
Yeah.
me, that was the
Oh my
coolest
God.
freaking thing in the world. The guy had a joystick, and I was like, "Oh my god, I could fly under this bridge."
Yeah.
And it reminded me of, I don't know if you remember that game called Real Driving that used to be in the
Oh
arcade
yeah.
back in the 80s.
Yeah.
And it was so freaking hard because it
Yeah.
was like driving for real. You're used to
Yeah.
games. So you try to
Oh, yeah.
drive this thing and you wreck it every time trying to do a loop and get up enough speed and do stuff. But
Yeah.
that same graphics look is what they had in the original Flight Simulator, which was just polygons and lines and a bridge, if you will. And
Yeah.
then after that, I had a friend who had an Atari, no, an Amiga 500 computer from Commodore, and he would pirate games back then. And he had like all the floppy disks. He had like 5,000 floppy disks lying around. He had every Microprose game, and he had it
Yeah.
written down. Remember back then, you had to go to the manual just to start the game. Would go to page 24, and what is the third word on the second line?
Yeah.
Just to
Yeah.
get into the game. That was their copy
That
protection.
was the passwords.
That was the
That
copy protection to get in and
yeah.
actually,
You're exactly right.
fly the Sims. But
Yeah.
Interactive Magic were the ones that introduced us because I was
Yeah.
covering their Apache sim at the time,
Yep.
and then Hind afterwards,
Yep.
and that was the golden age of flight sims,
Oh, it
because
really was, and it was so cool, and Janes was a big player. They were coming. I still remember all the Janes flight sims,
well,
and
actually, I don't know if you remember, but at that time, I had spoke to you after the internet. We stayed in touch a little bit throughout the
right,
'90s, and
right,
I remember I got a hold of you, and you were doing some stuff. I think for the Virginia National Guard, was it at the
yeah,
time?
back
Or
then, yeah, I was flying 58s with Virginia Guard then before I went back to North Carolina to get back into flying gunships and flying
yep.
Apache.
And at that time, I had started working with Janes. I was one of the outside. I was one of the
Yeah.
few. There was me, and there was another guy that was a writer that
Like a
covered
beta
stuff.
tester.
Yes, I was
Yeah.
one of the outside beta testers for Jane's Longbow 2, and then the what was it, the expansion pack for the Jane's Longbow one.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
picked me and another guy that had been covering the stuff online like we did, and then threw us in there with a bunch of other guys that were like former pilots, and another guy who
Yeah.
was like a worked on F-14s, and
Yeah.
then funny thing is, all those Janes guys, one of them that did the F-18 is actually Matt Wagner for uh, DCS for Eagle Dynamics.
Yeah,
Matt
I remember
Wagner,
you the last time you and I talked. I remember you were
yeah,
telling me
he had
that I
worked on
never
this.
knew.
He
Yeah,
had he had been the main guy on that Super Hornet for
yeah,
Janes. I didn't know him back then, but I knew of him. But I had tried getting you in, and at the time you didn't have like a computer, I think, that would have handled it or something. But
that's kind of where I'm at right now.
right, right. But
I'm waiting, but I will say I've got. I've done. I'm going to build this. I've got this system probably be about $5,500 by the
oh
time
yeah,
I'm done with it. But I've got a 32-inch curved monitor. I've got the joystick, the throttle, the Monster Tech
Those are sweet. I use those.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've got the Logitech X56 is what I've got, and then I've got the Thrustmaster TPR.
Oh, you got the real nice pedals.
Oh, I got the real nice
Those are the
pedals.
$500 ones, man. Those are
Oh
the
yeah,
shit. Those are really
oh
nice,
yeah.
dude.
So I've got those. I don't know. I've got everything except the actual computer. But what I've
Yeah.
done is I knew it was going to be expensive, so I just decided to kind of, start. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Start, over 6 to 8 months, and just hit a piece here and a piece there and a piece there, instead of just going out and spending $6,000.
Yep.
I could, I can get, buy a TPR pedals for 1 month, and then hit stick, joysticks and Monster Tech the following month, and hit a monitor the next month, and everything. So over about the past 6 to 8 months, I've been putting together, which is going to be a really really good system. And then now it's going to be I'm looking at the computer now. So
That's the hardest part right now, and it's a very, very unique time to be buying computer parts. It's actually a bad time because of all the scalpers and everything that went on because of the COVID and all the stuff.
yeah,
Everybody's stuck at home. Everybody's trying to find ways to make money.
yeah.
Um, I have a reasonably good system to run everything on. I wanted to get like a 30 series NVIDIA card, and you just
Well,
can't
see,
do it right now. That's the
that's what
hardest
I was
part.
looking at, and that is one of the main reasons why I haven't ordered anything yet, because that's what I figured. I've got all this money into all the equipment right now. I'm not going to sacrifice uh, just to get something immediately.
Yeah.
I'm just going to wait and then just kind of go from there.
I've
And
seen that integrated systems, when if you could find a company that you would trust, like like the Digital Storms or the Dells and whatnot,
yeah,
if you can find that, that's probably the best way to find a GPU with a decent processor as well. You know what I mean?
well,
That
I've got a
combo.
family member, guys married to my cousin, used to. I think he was vice president of marketing for Dell, and he has since now gone into more of the security aspect of computers, but still knows a lot of those guys, and so he's going to help me out. Kind of bridge the gap and kind of
Nice.
that's to build it. So because his friend who's building them right now is current, so he said he would help me out when I was ready. So I'm going to wait till kind of all this stuff, the COVID stuff, hopefully in the next few months will um, things will hopefully not backlog.
Stabilize. Yeah,
Yeah,
we need some
because
kind of
everything
stabilization because
so
it's terrible right
backlog.
now.
Yeah, so anyway, but so that's where I'm at. But I'm really looking forward to getting on it. But speaking of DCS, and kind of one of the main reasons why uh, we're talking is that I kind of did something very similar with Eagle Dynamics and Matt, that I did back in the 90s with Interactive Magic. Is I found out that they were going to do a 64D Block 2, and I have been watching a lot of DCS videos, and I, of course, Grim Reapers and all those guys. I've been watching 2-3 years ago. I was watching them, and so I was like, this is a pretty cool game. It's really, I mean, I don't know of any other one that you need a manual 2 inches thick to start the damn thing.
That's an easy one. That's an easy one.
Exactly. And I was like, this is pretty cool. And so I just started kind of watching him and looking and learning. And so I just sent, I sent an email up to support, I think at Eagle Dynamics, and I got a fairly quick response that same day, and they just wanted me to verify, send some pictures, and send some proof that I was a 64 pilot, and I did, and of course I've signed a NDA, so there's limited stuff I can say about it. But with that being said, everything. I'm probably one of, I don't know, 5, 6 Apache pilots, longbow pilots that's working with them right now.
That's fantastic.
And yeah, and so the enormous detail that they're going into is I'm just so impressed. And you know, Matt and the ED team, you know, if they have any questions, they'll send the questions to us, and you know, we really have a robust discussion amongst all the Apache pilots, and you know, we really work with them, and you know, because we really want it right, and especially if our names are going to be in the game or attached to the game, you know, we definitely want it right. And I think everybody out there in the DCS community is going to be just blown away on some of the things that we're talking about that will, you know, be released in the game.
That's exciting news, dude.
Awesome.
As
Yeah,
soon as
it's
I,
gonna be
you know, it's really funny. I did an interview with Matt Wagner about a year and a half ago, and the one question I asked him at the time was, you know, what is the one module you would like to work on that you've never worked on? And he came out and said the AH-64.
yeah,
So
that's
I
great. Yeah.
kind of knew back then, and nobody
There's
really
something
believed
coming
it.
down the road.
Yeah, nobody really believed it but me, you know. And then they announced it not long ago, you know, a few months
Yeah.
back that they were actually going to do it, and it's like it's an exciting time to be in the flight sims. It really
Yeah,
is.
and Ron, I tell you, I saw the video of the new clouds.
Yes.
I'm just, I mean, and I guess just because like you and I go back so long into the sim community and aviation sims, but you know, there was a point in time where you know, it was like a stick figure.
Yes. Well, and not only that, the one thing that would kill your performance, and this is why I'm skeptical too. I've seen the clouds, and it scares me
Yeah,
because I know going back to our days, that when we played those simulations back in the day, the only way you could make them run right was turn the clouds off.
yes,
That was
yeah,
usually like if you had to sacrifice anything, you know what I mean, to make your frames per second go higher, you would turn the clouds off. In almost
yeah,
any simulation back then, it was a flight sim, you know.
yeah,
So that's the old school me looking at them clouds, going, "Wow, those look freaking amazing!" But holy
yeah.
cow, am I going to need a 3090? You know what I mean?
That's right.
RTX 3090 just to run
That,
this now,
that's
you
what I
know?
was. That's see. That's why I have kind of really been waiting to do the computer, because that's the bread and butter. I've got everything to go with it, but that's the bread and butter. And I'm waiting for something that will handle everything, but not just handle it right now, but will handle it for the next few years.
Yeah, you're going to get about 2 to 3 years max.
Yeah.
That's your realistic, you know, buffer to look for when it comes to this stuff, you know,
Okay.
because it does change that quick. I mean, even
Yeah.
DCS today, over the past couple years that I've been covering it, it's
Oh,
changed.
I
You know.
remember seeing one, was it 1.5?
Yep.
Yeah, I remember seeing 1.5 and then seeing, you know, where we are now, and just you know, just the explosion and the effects,
And
and you know, the sounds are just, I
oh
mean, it
yeah.
blows my mind away.
Well, that's like the one thing, and that was a question for you. You know, like you have real Huey experience, and the one thing
Yeah.
I thought was really neat in DCS is I love flying the choppers, but like I like the Huey a lot, and I have the
Yeah.
Huey in DCS, and I thought it was really cool how I guess when you're starting to stress those rotors, they thump harder,
Oh, they do.
and you can
They do.
hear it's like thump 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 thump. It gets really loud, like as you're
Yeah.
stressing it, you know, and then
Yeah.
that's how you can tell. You know what I mean? Like
Oh, yeah.
because the only thing we're
Well,
missing in the Sims is the true situational awareness of feeling things. You know?
so think about the rotor blades like this. So at flat pitch, they're like this. So as you start pulling more power and more power and more power, obviously they're increasing. So that angle of attack is obviously increasing. So, it's creating that more sound, that more thumping coming through the air.
Yep.
And, and I should have brought it with me. It's up in my game room, but, one of my prized possessions, that I have is, I don't know if I sent you a picture of them or not.
We spoke a couple weeks ago and you showed it to me. It was pretty freaking cool. I'll let you finish the story.
So I will tell everyone that I was fortunate enough. So one of and I can only speak for how our unit ran it. Other people do it differently, but for gunnery, there's a top gun at gunnery. And it's combine your day score and your night score, and I mean it is what it is, and it's a score, and it's put up on the board for everyone to see. And I was fortunate enough to be top gun of the battalion one year, and so when you're top gun of the battalion, you're awarded a rocket, and this is a rocket that's already been fired. That the battalion safety officer and the battalion SP, standardization pilot, will go down and pick up some rockets that, are fired. They're training rockets. So there's nothing in them. The engines, the rocket motors have already fired. And you're presented with a rocket by the colonel in front of the entire battalion of aviators. So I've got, in my kind of man cave, so to speak, I have in the corner my rocket, which is actually, and this kind of dates me as an Apache pilot, it's an MPSM rocket, which is a multi-purpose submunition. So there was, I think it was 7 little mini, basically grenades in the rocket, and they had a little parachute on it, and so it was kind of a it's like basically a cluster munition,
cluster bomb, yeah, kind of, for a
rocket. That's basically what it is in a rocket. And so that is upstairs, along with my 30 millimeter, which I'll show you in a little bit. And with that being said, and my Cav Stetson sits on top of my rocket. And I was very, very fortunate and ironic that my wife's cousin his farm is next door to Robert Duvall's. And we talked and tried to, because he was living in Argentina like 10, 11 months out of the year, because his wife is Argentinian. But Robert Duvall has about 300 acres in Northern Virginia. A lot of people don't know that his dad was a Naval Academy graduate and a Navy admiral. And one of the last places that he was at the Pentagon. So I know that's kind of, Robert Duvall just has a fondness for Northern Virginia. And so anyway, long story short, I had the opportunity to have Robert Duvall sign my Cav Stetson. And he said to Rex, I love the smell of, to Rex, best wishes, R.H. Duvall. And then below it, I asked him if he would put the quote from the movie, which he did. And it says, I love the smell of napalm in the morning. It smells like victory.
Yep.
And that is on my Cav Stetson, signed by Robert Duvall. And it sits on top of my rocket, which I sent you a picture of just to
It doesn't get much better than that, dude. It really doesn't. That would be like having a lightsaber signed by Luke Skywalker, Mark Hamill, right? Like, it's just
that was as a gun pilot, that was pretty damn cool.
I mean, that's the example, right? That most people, everybody saw Apocalypse Now back then. You get excited for that kind of thing, and flying helicopters and doing that job that he did. And, and here you went on to do it and then some,
Yeah, so that was pretty cool. But I can tell you, everybody who listens to your channel, the DCS Apache that's coming, man, y'all are gonna love it. We've been, the ED guys have really been working hard, and like I said, I'm just one member of the team of Apache guys that are part of the group. And so we're presented with all kinds of questions, and we certainly, we go round and round about it, and kind of have a consensus amongst the Apache drivers, and send lots of pictures and videos and discussions at length. And we're really trying to help Matt and the rest of the guys, and they're going to do it right. So I think y'all will be very pleased.
Oh, I think it's going to be awesome too. I can't wait. And this is the year for that stuff because, they
Oh
were
yeah.
saying it's supposed to be before the year's out. But on top of that, we have the Hind coming. We have an
Yep.
MI-24P.
Yep.
We have an OH-58.
Yep.
We have the Kiowa coming too. So
Yep.
it's like it's just this is the year for me, dude, because I love
Well,
helicopters more than I love any sims.
yeah. DCS, the year of the helicopter.
It really is, man. It's going to be
Yeah.
so amazing. And I think the great thing is, and I know how the software development goes for having been in this field for so long. All the stuff they're going to learn and figure out with the Hind and with the Kiowa is definitely going to be, ported over into what's going to happen with the Apache too. So any of the technology improvements and even environment improvements that make a helicopter fly better within the environment, et cetera, that's all going to be, wound into the Apache. I think it'll be last compared to the other stuff because the Kiowa was supposed to be last year right around December, and they pushed it back a little bit.
I knew that there was a delay. I wasn't sure. So
Yeah, they had a couple setbacks, and I love DCS. Don't get me wrong, but the only downside of DCS is because it's an ever evolving environment. As they
yeah.
come out with new improvements to the engine, they tend to break some of the stuff that happens before.
Yeah.
And then they scurry to fix it. So that's the only thing it's a bummer about DCS. It's an advantage, but also it's its worst enemy at times because it's this big environment you can plug everything into. But if you're a developer, you have to keep up with what they do.
Oh
So
yeah.
let's say you
Yeah.
came out with a campaign 2 years ago for, I don't know, a P-51, and they change one thing. It can break the AI, how they're, I've seen it happen in a MiG, or not in a MiG, Sabre,
Okay.
F-86. One of the campaigns that was from Reflective Simulations. Greg does great work. He's one of the best campaign makers, I think, in all of DCS, and I love his historical accuracy. But the planes in front of me after I took off, I was waiting for the rest of my group to catch up to me, and they're just running into each other on the runway and blowing
Oh
up.
wow.
You know what I mean? So like one little
Yeah.
thing can change in an update,
So
and it breaks
drastic.
other things. But again, the flip side of that is everything that they learn along the way goes into the next product too.
Oh
So
yeah.
so
That's awesome.
I think having the Hind, I think the Kiowa is going to come out first. I think the Hind will be next, and then I think the Apache will be the big icing on the cake that we're
Yeah.
waiting for.
And I don't know one way or the other on that. So I'm not even sure. I mean,
Oh, I'm sure I wouldn't even ask you to be honest, because I know there's only so much you can say. I've been under the
yeah.
NDAs before, and I'm not
Yeah.
even going to ask dumb questions because
Um,
nobody can
but
tell us
yeah,
that.
so that I really don't know, but I do know that I mean I've seen the work, and I'm really excited about
Oh,
it.
it's an exciting time, man, and there's no way they're going to do it without front seat, back seat. That's going to happen. I just don't know how.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be fantastic. And when that does happen, you and I are going to go up,
Oh, hey,
and,
amen.
and I'm going to let you be the pilot, and I'm going to be the gunner. So, and then maybe
And
we'll swap around.
what's so funny about that is I can tell you the guy in the front has the most work, and he or she is the bread and butter of that crew, because in reality the backseater is the taxi cab driver to get you where you're
That's
supposed to
right.
be.
Yeah, you're basically getting from point A to point B as safely as possible, and picking the
Absolutely.
best route and keeping the ship afloat.
Yep.
You're
Yep.
basically the captain of the ship. You know,
Yeah, but boy, that front seater, that's the one who's running and
he's got
picking
the
all the
workload.
targets out.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, navigation, talking on the radios, and all that kind of stuff. Now I will tell you, and this is just how we did it in our community, in my particular unit. is the person on the, the guy in the front seat and the guy in the back seat. And when I say guy, I just mean,
I know. Yeah.
Guy, girl,
Yeah.
whatever. But the guy in the front seat can fly. A lot of people, I get that question asked is, can the front seater fly? Front seater is a fully rated AH-64 aviator. And yes, there are flight controls up in the front, and yes, they fly. We divide flying duties back and forth between the front and the back seat, because a lot of, if it's a long mission and everything, the flying does take, especially night system flying, is extremely difficult and tiresome. So you do kind of just take off. It's like being in a car for 15 hours and having one person drive all 15 hours. You want to swap off and,
yep.
and do that. We do that in the aircraft as well. Also, another thing that we do in the aircraft is kind of a rule of thumb: whoever's flying, whoever's not on the flight controls, talks on the radio.
It takes care of all the mundane tasks, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And in that way, if you're not flying, you can concentrate on talking to somebody. If they give you, if they're giving you frequency change information, you can be in the aircraft and I'm sorry, my dog's barking, but the writing down frequencies or information or situational stuff kind of going on your kneeboard, but you can't do that when you're flying. And so, you really kind of do divide that up. And so that's pretty good about that. So,
well, it's a workload too, because I think what most people don't realize too is, like, the Apache is very, very unique in the sense that, you've got all that data. Your helmet itself is technology.
Oh, absolutely. It really is. And
it takes, getting your eyes adjusted just right to be able to accept technology in one eye, right?
Oh, and absolutely. Then, on the right eye, and there's a misconception, and maybe I need to be a little bit more specific. There was another guy who called me out on it, but no, the eyes are not chameleons. No, we don't. Which I just thought was crazy that anyone would even really think that our eyes operate independently like chameleons. But so no, they don't do that. But you do get used to switching back and forth as far as the focus.
Sure.
Between the right eye and the left eye. And again, they're not operating independently. I always just kind of thought that was absurd.
No, our brains can't handle that. You know what I mean? That's just that's common sense. Whoever asked that was probably like,
yeah, I was just like, well,
must have been that guy.
Yeah, so we kind of won't go into that, but
there's always a few of them out there. I tend to find
I kind of thought that was just, but I made an assumption, and maybe the way I said it didn't come, I guess when I said independently, which was, I'll take the heat on that one. I just said, I guess my feeling is that when I said independently, I was talking about independently focusing.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're focusing independently. You're putting your task on the monocle right now, and then you're taking your task away from it for a second to go back into the cockpit.
Exactly. That's all I was.
A constant switching, I would think,
yeah,
right?
So I was just, so anyway, but you do get good at it, and it becomes second nature of the focusing back and forth, and I've been really, really lucky. I look back at it, and I still keep in contact with my friend who was my crew member, where we crewed together in Afghanistan. And of course, we had flown OH-58s together too. And he was a police pilot, and his name's Dave. And I told Dave the other day, I said, looking back at everything, I said, sometimes it's amazing that we did some of the things that we did.
Right.
You know, because, you know, you just kind of, I sit there and think about some of the situations we were in, and I think, there's obviously rivalries within Army aviation. Well, I think aviation in general, but, rivalries between Apache pilots and Black Hawk pilots and Chinook pilots and everything. And they would give us crap, we'd give them crap and stuff. But at the end of the day, there isn't anything we wouldn't do for them. And, it was the, vice versa as well. So, but I'm certainly looking forward to being able to get in DCS with this airframe and really evolve over the next year or two and see all the changes, just kind of like what Heat Blur's done and
Oh my God,
everybody
they're the
knows.
best, dude.
Yeah. I mean,
Don't get me started on Heat Blur, man. They're my favorite. Out of all the stuff in DCS, they have to be the developer. The Tomcat is just such a machine, dude.
yeah, that's the what all the videos that I've watched over for the F-14 is just insane.
It really
And so
is.
what's it like? So real quick, and then
Yeah.
so I'll give you two stories.
Okay.
And so the guy who lived two doors down from me, I'll say his name because unfortunately he has passed on. But his name was Captain Mike Norman, and a Navy captain. He was a test pilot for the VF-84 Jolly Rogers.
Oh wow.
All right, so he knew I loved, he knew I was a Apache pilot and all that kind of stuff, and so we got to always talking about the final countdown, and
Fantastic movie. In case anybody's knowing what that is, fantastic movie. But go
oh
ahead.
yeah, it's awesome. So one night, and so down in his pool room, down his basement, he had the Jolly Rogers flag, big. It was framed, and on the around the frame were all the signatures of all the pilots, in the Jolly Roger. Well, he had a somewhat of a semi reunion, and he invited me over, and they were having scotch, and we were just drinking and sitting down and talking with them. And there were several guys from the movie that did the I think
Work. Yeah.
that did the flying in the movie, and I got them to sign my final countdown of
that's so freaking awesome.
the Blu-ray. So and let me, if I got it, if you give me just a
Go
second.
right ahead, man.
All right. I don't know if you can see this. It's called the Raid.
Yep.
All right. This is sorry about that. This is a book about the Sante POW rescue mission. And if you remember, they assaulted a POW compound in Vietnam. It was about 23 miles outside of Hanoi. And the camp was empty. So I read this book when I was in high school.
Oh, wow.
So later on, my father, when my dad retired, he was the director of airborne law enforcement for FLIR, forward-looking infrared, for FLIR Systems, Inc. And one of the guys that worked with my dad was the flight lead on this mission. And his name was Colonel Marty Donahue. And so we were in the hotel business, and I gave him some hotel rooms, and he called me up and said, Rex, I'm the president of the Sante Raiders Association, and Mr. and Mrs. Perot are hosting us, and I would like for you to be my guest down in Dallas. So I said, of course.
Right.
So I go down.
When, right?
Yeah. So I go down there. And so what I want to show you is right here, I have, I don't know if
Oh,
you can,
wow. That's a bunch of signatures.
I have all the signatures. I have the signature of the commanding general who led the mission and the helicopter pilots. Here's some more
Holy
of the
cow.
POWs and the intel guys that were on the mission. So all the Green Berets that assaulted the mission, that assaulted the POW compound were there. The POWs that were being held there were there, and the helicopter pilots that flew them in were there. And you talk about intimidation.
Right.
I was a young aviator. I just kept my mouth closed and listened to all the stories for an
Man.
entire weekend. And Mr. and Mrs. Perot took all of us out on the Texas Queen Riverboat on Lake Ray Hubbard in Dallas. And I was in the middle of the table. You know, they had tables on this big boat. And right where the podium was to speak was nearly a life-size portrait of Colonel Bull Simons.
Wow. All right, guys. That about does it for the interview. Sorry about how it ended kind of abruptly. Some of the footage at the very end of the recording got messed up during the editing. But the good news is we were at the end of the interview anyway, so we really didn't miss anything. And it was such a joy to catch up with Rex, who I haven't talked to that much over the last few years until recently again. And wow, what a career! And the coolest thing is now he's helping those guys out as being part of the team that is working on the DCS Apache as one of those outside consultants from a real world experience that they happen to call upon when they do build stuff like this in simulations. But yeah, what a great time. What a fantastic interview. It was great catching up with Rex. I hope you've enjoyed the interview as much as I've enjoyed doing it. And as always, thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel. Feel free to hit that like button. And until next time, guys,